Is on the calendar.
Yes, you are. Yes.
Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Mahone Bay Town Council meeting on this beautiful, sunny and fastly cooling spring night. We do have a full agenda for you tonight, and we have a full council table as well. And we'll begin by acknowledging that we are again gathered tonight in Mi'kma'ki. It is the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And tonight we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties. And we do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We'll call the meeting to order. Council, you have an agenda in front of you that was emailed to you. I will ask you what your wish is, but I would note that the presentation by the fire chief has had to be postponed. So item number 4 will not be occurring. Okay, Councilor Carver.
Your worship, I'll move that the agenda be approved as circulated without amendment and with the addition of one item under new business.
Okay, what is that?
Notice of motion about developing a policy for film productions in the town.
Okay. Thank you. We had a seconder, Councilor Feeney seconds. You've heard the motion with the amendments on the presented agenda. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to some of the many sets of minutes that are included. Item 2.1, the special council meeting of April 19th.
Mayor, I'd move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Item 2.2, the regular council meeting of April 25th. Councillor Owens-Croft.
I move that we accept these minutes.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Item 2.3, the special council meeting of April the 26th.
I would move that we accept those minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Now. We have a seconder. Councillor Carver. Moved and seconded. On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried. And let's go finally to the special council meeting of May 10th. Councillor Carver moves to accept. Councillor Owens-Croft seconds that motion. On the question, all in favor? The motion is also carried. We don't have a public input session tonight, I don't think. Kirk? No? Okay. And no presentations as the fire chief is not available. There is no correspondence. Let's go right to staff reports.
There's a question on 4.1. Do we
Yes.
still accept his report? Because we received a copy of it, right?
Yeah, are we
We could accept it for information.
expecting him to present this quarter, or is that not likely?
I didn't ask him if he would present this quarter. Usually it's just a question and answer thing.
So
If
we
council
let
would
him
like-
off the hook by just accepting the report if council doesn't.
Or does anyone have any questions on the report that's been tabled that the chief should really address for you? No?
Mayor, I'd move that we accept the report for information purposes.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Now. On the motion, on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you to the fire chief for his report. Let's go to the staff report to council for May 14th.
Thank you, Mr.
CAO?
Mayor. Just the usual short staff report this time around. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to take them. We're gradually reducing the number of things.
Mhm.
Still a ways to go before the end of the term.
You'll be away on leave at the end of the month?
I will be away starting shortly.
Yes.
So I
Will
won't be
the-
here for the next.
Will the deputy CAO stand around with questions on the?
Yes, he'll be as prepared as he can be.
Okay, so leave your big sticks at home now. Manfred. Okay,
Mayor, would you like a motion to accept that?
yes, please, to accept.
Why don't I do that? Move that we accept the staff report for information.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Lawrence Cross seconds. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to 6.2, the staff report on the appointment of an assistant returning officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this follows on a number of steps that have been taken by council over the past 4 months or so, setting up for the municipal elections this fall. I think it's all outlined in the document. There's no additional cost here, just a clarification of the title, deputy versus assistant. But the recommendation here is, because it is required under legislation, that we name these appointments. We've gone through a selection process. We found somebody to perform this role, and we're requesting that they be appointed. So the motion is included. Happy to take any questions.
Just gonna,
Councilor now.
I was just gonna make a motion that we appoint Brendan Wright as Assistant Returning Officer for the 2024 municipal elections.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Carver seconds. You've heard the motion duly seconded. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to the Article 6.3, the staff report on service standards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this one did come to us a little while ago, and as you probably noticed on the monthly reports, we've been expecting to get it to you for a while. It's gotten pushed off by a couple of other priorities, but happy to present it here. So staff have put some discussion and time into coming up with some service standards we feel could be published. I believe this was the intention of the original direction, so hopefully this is what you're looking for. There are a few pages here if anybody has questions, and what we're looking for, I guess, is a direction to publish these standards on the website, I assume.
Councilor Carver.
Yeah, I have a few questions. And I really like the idea of having the standard, so that's great. For emails and phone messages or text messages, it refers to messages coming into any town of Mahone Bay address or phone number. But it doesn't specify whether that's a designated person. So does that include an email that is written to Dear Mayor or Dear CAO or Dear Councilors? It just is so vague. I wondered what it meant in terms of the specificity of an addressee.
So it was really just intended to be anyone who works for the town has a personalized email address. And so an email sent to one of those personalized email addresses would be responded to slightly less promptly than an email sent to the generic addresses that multiple people monitor. So those inquiries in finance are like our generic addresses that there's always somebody at the front desk checking those in the morning if they came in the day before and that kind of thing. Whereas the staff person's email with their own name, they're the only person, so reasonably they might be on the road for the day or something like that. So that's why I could exclude counselors because I hadn't really thought about how you guys have down in the home bay addresses as well.
In that, then, could we just specify any other staff?
Yes, yeah, I think maybe say staff.
Emails to staff at, you know,
That'd be a
Yeah,
good clarification,
yeah,
just to
that'd be a
leave
clarification.
counselors off of that, because.
That, could it include the phrase that you used, the personalized address?
Yeah, I mean, that is what I meant by any
Yeah.
other town, but we could try to find a different wording.
Yeah, it just left me unsure.
Yes.
There were a couple of comments I'd like to see added. Do you want me to send those?
That would be great if you
Yeah,
can.
okay,
if
I
you don't
will do
mind.
that. And the code red, why is it 12 hours? For the alert?
If an unanticipated service disruption comes along. Well, the reason for that right now is that we don't have a staff person on call to do public updates. So the staff people who are on call, you know, are the actual response staff. So if we get a call, we have during the seasonal part of the year where Public Works is on call, we have a Public Works staff person on call. We have for snow, we have water throughout the year, we have electrical throughout the year. So if the call comes in outside of work hours, we've got somebody to respond from one of those departments, but we don't have somebody who's on call to put out the code red alert. So typically that alert will happen as soon as possible, but if no one is willing to voluntarily pop up and put in an hour of overtime, it will be the next morning. So that's where the 12 hours is, because it's the end of our workday to the beginning of the next workday.
So how many staff people can do it? Up
I
until
think we have 3 people trained on it right now, but the bigger issue is that they're not on call.
Right.
So I can't guarantee their
Within
availability.
12 hours.
We still usually do, but it's just a matter of saying guaranteed, you gotta pay them versus like, hey, do you have a minute, could you do this and get
Yeah.
overtime?
So the problem is, the situation is that within that 12 hours, there's gonna be all sorts of social media and the panic and the hypotheses and the imaginary scenarios. So,
Yeah, I think what you should imagine is like a water main break or power outage that happens in the evening. And, you know, whether we can alert people to it that evening versus the following morning, we'd say, you know, you're aware of this outage and we've got a scheduled time of return and it's later today, typically.
For those of you who've been sitting in the dark all night, the powers are.
So the only other thing I could suggest there is obviously putting somebody on call for that or asking the call center if they could put out updates, or I just, you know, I wouldn't want to ask the on-call staff person, who's often in inclement weather, try to be getting an update put out
right,
on their
no,
phone.
I
you know.
understand that, but the call center could do
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's our only other option. We give them
Yeah.
pre-formatted things and see if they could
Yeah.
do something like that, but
It's a bit of a complicated program, like, and it
Yeah.
wouldn't be the same person answering at the call center, like, it would be rotating people, I would assume.
yeah, I mean, they've kind of indicated that they could do a little bit more than take a phone call, but that might be a bit much.
So obviously that 12 hours might not really come into effect on the weekend.
Well, I mean, it might not. On the weekend, like, we've never not been able to get somebody to work an hour of overtime if we ask, so. Yeah, I mean, it's true that we're still vulnerable there if no staff can be reached and nobody's willing or able to help out. And I think all we could do, we could just cross-train more people with the code red alerts, you know, that's an option.
So you say volunteer for the extra hour. So if something happened, would those 3 staff people be notified that there's a thing that their code red should go out so that they can know about it? Because they might not even know about it.
That's what happens now, is that we just will notify people by email, but if you're not checking your email, you know, they wouldn't know to look. We often will send texts, not everybody's, you know, that's a volunteer
Yeah,
thing on the part of staff to be available to respond to texts if they're not on call. But we have a good staff that way, so, you know,
Yeah,
these are
fair enough.
minimum standards intended to kind of
But
deal
just
with that
wondering-
scenario, but nobody goes.
I was only wondering about the communications part of it. That explains it. No sense.
Counselor Wilson, you look perplexed.
Well, no, I do have a question though, and put it in the context of, I understand that there are regulations and rules and laws and so on. But I'm wondering if that is the best we can do, is it 6-month turnaround on the development agreement? Or is that just etched in stone because of the regulatory?
So I mean, it's within 6 months. I think the issue, there is a regulatory component. The regulatory component is gonna take at least 3 months, because that's just going to PAC, advertising a PM, coming back to PAC, making a recommendation to council, having a public hearing and coming back to council. That's, you know, 3 months at a minimum. I think that the request to put 6 comes from the need to have time to prepare these different parts if it's a complex application. So what I've usually heard them quote is 4 to 6, right? That's what we usually say. It's gonna take 4 to 6 months for DA. But because these are, I'm only pushing to the, you know, within X number of months, rather than saying 4 to 6 months, it could be 3 months, but it will be within 6 months. So, yeah, I think, you know, I've vetted this with the folks in Chester. They wouldn't be comfortable with us saying within 4 months, because it certainly isn't always within 4 months.
Do you know the timelines for the other locals? Because there seems to be a lot of comparisons going on, you know, from the public. That, you know, we can get them faster in other municipalities? Is it a staffing issue or?
I don't know if the other units would put a timeline to it. I mean, usually what happens when people say they get something faster is that they're confusing the type of permit that they got. So a development permit is gonna be a lot quicker than a development agreement. And the development permit standard in here, I think is only 3 weeks, so that's, you know, that's quite a bit different. But, yeah, I mean, we could ask the other units if they, you know, would put a number to it. They probably wouldn't want me putting a number to it publicly if they haven't done that, but not sure how it compares specifically to for DA with the other units.
I think from experience, it compares very favorably from my perspective.
Mhm.
I've experienced lots of delays also. So I don't think that we delay as much as people think we do delay.
Okay.
Oh, I have another
Councillor
question,
Carver.
which is about the fire inspection complaint. So my question there is, what constitutes a fire inspection? And then what constitutes a complaint?
So this is the fire code inspection. So these are the people who are inspecting for fire code compliance. So, you know, if it's a complaint being investigated, typically it's being made by a third party. So that would be a customer, client, or maybe a tenant. Pretty often, I would think a tenant, saying that the building needs an inspection for some reason that they would cite. So depending on the severity of what's being cited, they'll come out as soon as they can to investigate. Yeah, I think, you know, they otherwise operate on the basis of like a set schedule, so they return to a property periodically, depending on the use and that type of thing. But that's not the type of standard we're issuing here, so, you know, he could say, I come every year, but if there's a complaint, I'll come specific to the complaint.
Might it help to put it in fire code?
Yeah, I can say that.
Just-
So basically, this is not a complaint against the fire inspector for his inspection.
No, this
It's a
was meant to
complaint
be.
that somebody would say,
Yeah.
that building needs to be inspected.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what it's meant to be. But I'll clarify, it's fire code complaint.
So that might be something like not having adequate egress in an apartment, for example. Is that a fire code?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
that's a-
anything from having
Yeah.
smoke detectors all the way to having a proper exit type of thing. Like, you know, usually you're not gonna get complaints that speak to things like fire separations, because that's not something that most people would notice. But yeah, entrances and
Mhm.
exits, if you find your tenant and, you know, they don't have working smoke detectors or fire extinguishers haven't been getting inspected, that type of thing.
Okay.
So can I ask one more question on that? So,
Yes.
so a tenant might address a question or a complaint concern to a landlord. But then if the problem is not addressed, who does the tenant address the complaint to? Would it come to you? Would it come to town hall? Would it come?
I think if you call the front desk, they'll put you through to the inspector. It is a
Mhm.
contract position with Chester, like the other building services
Mm.
stuff. Yeah, so if you call the front desk, I'm not sure, you know, a lot of people, if they have an issue with the landlord not dealing with something, might be calling the tenancy board.
Mm.
In my experience, the tenancy board, no matter what the issue, just refers them back to the municipality.
Mhm.
So that's probably what would happen. I have to say, I get a lot less of that here because we have a lot lower share of rentals and they're not necessarily like the worst possible conditions of rentals as you might have in some communities.
Okay.
Any other comments? There is a motion included in that item. If somebody would consider.
I'll be happy to make it if I can find it again. I move that council directs staff to publish the standards for town services as amended on the town website to be updated as required.
Thank you. Seconded by the deputy mayor. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to the 6.4, which is a rezoning request.
Thank you, Mr.
Making the
Mayor.
rounds the last couple of
So we
days.
just had a discussion about the amount of time and steps involved in processing these kind of things. this is the very beginning. So we did receive a rezoning request, following on from the new planning strategy land use bylaw. We now have a new zone type, and that's the multi-unit zone. And this request came in, and the first step is for council to authorize staff to go ahead and do a public information meeting and prepare a report to go to the planning advisory committee. And so that's what's being recommended here tonight, just for anybody watching or anybody here, for clarification from PAC. If it is recommended back to council, council will then schedule a public hearing. And that hearing will be an opportunity for the general public to comment on the proposed rezoning. And then based on that comment, council will have the opportunity to grant second reading or potentially not. So that's the process from here, and the motion is.
Mayor,
Councilor Meany.
I'd be prepared to move that along, and I've moved the council direct staff to prepare draft amendments to the MPS and the LUB and related staff report, including conducting a public information meeting for presentation to the PAC. I guess that'd be the June PAC is the cadence?
Yeah.
The June PAC committee meeting.
Councilor Carver, or Deputy Mayor? Okay. As my gaze moved to Councilor Carver from watching Councilor Feeney speak, I noticed that Councilor Carver has seconded the motion. Okay, you heard the motion? On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Alrighty, that is the end of the correspondence items. Let's go to council items 7.1, the draft 24-25 operating and capital budgets. The labor of love on the part of all the councilors around the table, some of the staff, some other staff were involved. I think someone commented it was something like 16 or 17 hours of deliberation as the group. And also lots of individual time considering the issues. So.
I have a couple of quick questions. If you don't mind.
Okay.
Just two way clarifications, I guess.
Yes, please.
On page 80, I believe. I'll try to get my notes. So I'm trying to get the notes. So I have the notes somewhere.
Page 80.
Yeah. It's just seeking to clarify that the two line items for purchases. There's an SPI and Solar Garden, and then Solar Garden by itself.
We were asked to move Solar Garden out of the top line, and obviously Ashley didn't change the name of the line, so thankfully, this is the penultimate presentation, so I'll note that for correction.
Okay. And then just a follow-up to that, and maybe this was discussed, but I think it's one of the things I missed. So this is the purchasing power from ourselves. So my assumption is that it will be reflected somewhere else as income or revenue.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out where that was.
It's not reflected in here otherwise as revenue, and the Solar Garden operation is not reflected in here as an expenditure. So yeah, you did miss this, but I'm happy to repeat it. Is what we essentially decided we had to do for this year was, you know, from the utilities perspective, we need to record that we're buying power so we can have some kind of budget. And we have said that that power is purchased at the avoided cost of NSPI. So all we're doing is we're just saying 16% of our power is supposed to be supplied by the Solar Garden this year. So at the same rate, let's just break out 16% of it and show it there. So I think, you know, from the utilities perspective, we're covered on the cost of the power. As far as the revenue goes, we really don't know yet what the differential between that price of power and the cost of operating the Solar Garden is going to be. So that's where the missing piece is. If there is any differential between the cost of operating the Solar Garden and the purchase of power, then that would end up as a return. But we don't know at this point what the estimate would be. So the conservative thought was just not recording it at all. And then we'll find out later in the year when we're in a position to actually come to that point, what the return is. And whether, whether it is accrued to the town or the utility, that's a discussion for council when we're at that point.
Councilor Wilson.
One second. Just when do we expect to know?
I do believe we'll know by July, but ultimately, a lot of that is out of our own staff hands. We're dependent on area to report on some of these details. But as far as the outstanding operation and maintenance item, we'll have that settled within the next 15 days or so.
It'd be helpful if the federal government would accelerate their progress payments to us. That would help resolve the issue as well, so.
And the other thing, of course, is once we've actually reached that point where we've been paid back for things, we'll be by July, hopefully in a position to go for short-term bridge financing for the Municipal Finance Corp. So that will get us out of the line of credit interest rate.
The second question was page 76. So one of the notes in the revenue talks about assuming a rate change of 30% for the last quarter.
Yes,
Page 70, Deputy Mayor,
76.
so
76?
the cadence of this is that we're going to have a report, water rate study report in July. We know that right now there's a shortfall, pretty substantial shortfall, right? So if you look at that accumulated deficit, 324, the Utility Review Board actually requires that you pay off your accumulated deficit within 7 years. So we're basically talking about being $46,000 a year behind without anything else considered. So based on that, we know that the rate study is going to project an increase in rates. Ultimately, if we decide not to proceed with the increase in rates, there'll be a larger shortfall in the year than otherwise. And that's a decision council will have to make in July, whether to go to the board for an increase in rates or not. But I guess we're assuming here that we will do that. So that's, there'll be a shortfall if we don't do that.
So in following that, I think the last conversation we had, I think we talked about it's not possible for us to do a 30% rate increase anyways, even if we do the water rate study. So I was taken aback why we would reflect a 30% increase when we know in principle we're not able to do that. So does that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we just never were directed to do anything differently,
I think
but we.
I think in the end, it fell down to the statutory requirements of making sure we had sufficient funds in the short term to cover off the deficit over the 7-year cadence. And so we know that it's compounding, and I think the cumulative deficit within the water utility is high enough now that we know I think we're just covering off what we have to from a legislative perspective. But and we've got a whole utility, as we talked about, generating $800,000 a year in revenue, and we're spending $3 or $4 million on water upgrades. So it's going to be tough to make the math work in the short term, that's for sure. We better hope for some growth. Good news is we've got a project on Main Street that's going to help with that. We just need a few more just like it.
So, I mean, ultimately, it's just a question of how we show the projection for the rest of the year. And we weren't directed to take it out, so we left it in. But I do understand the council may decide that this is not something that we would move forward with in July.
But to the deputy mayor's point, there hasn't been a council decision made on water rates.
No, and in that respect, like you can tonight, if you want to, when we get to the water budget motion, make a specification that it's being passed as amended to reflect no increase in rates. And then actually can just do that in the final version.
I think that because the rates reflected now.
And the expenditures totally won't change. The expenditures is actually what you're setting in the budget motion. And the expenditures aren't gonna change, it'll be more of a deficit. So, yeah, if you wanna put that in, whoever makes that, if you all are in agreement on that.
Are we?
No, I wasn't here, so I couldn't disagree. And I would have.
You would have disagreed or you'd be.
Okay,
Thank you.
anything else in question? I believe we have a series of motions, CEO, typically we do.
So I did just recirculate that motion. I know Joe has a printout, so just.
Okay, Councillor
I can
Feeney,
get
if you'd like to
started,
start
Mayor.
us off.
Sure. So we have a number of motions. The first one is to, that council approve the 2024-2025 operating budget with operating expenditures in the amount of $3,112,504 as presented in the documents. With general rates set at $1.11 per $100 of residential assessment and $3.05 on $100 of commercial assessment. And that the infrastructure charge be amended to $502.23 a unit, with $202.23 of that amount now dedicated to the stormwater management program.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, second,
I was second as long as I get the first question.
on the question.
The verbiage that I've seen elsewhere about this talks about infrastructure charges per dwelling unit. But I'm not sure that's correct.
Oh, you mean in the,
It's per lot?
It's per PID, I said.
Yeah, PID, okay.
I think it's per dwelling unit or vacant lot. So there are cases where there's multiple dwelling units on one property being assessed for multiple infrastructure charges.
Mhm.
And then there's also cases where vacant lots are being assessed. for-
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so, okay, I understand that, fine. Now, just one comment, and that came from a conversation earlier, suggesting, or I think an email suggesting that the $202 be broken out and kept separate as a stormwater item, so we would in fact have two infrastructure charges as opposed to one. I mean, it's semantics. I realize, but
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
think
I
it's-
really, I guess I can speak to that as a question, but I've viewed to including it here because the basis for levying the infrastructure charge has been determined. And so we're just increasing it. We're not doing something new that would require a different basis, I guess, because we're not, we talked about how we didn't want to institute a new basis for this charge, like permeable surfaces or anything. So I just have felt that, you know, we've been able to successfully implement an infrastructure charge on this basis for a long time. The simplest way to execute this would just be to say, we're increasing that charge and dedicating a portion of it to the stormwater reserve.
how
Yeah.
do we ensure that the stormwater reserve stays pure?
I think the question is, what do we do in the stormwater management bylaw that's coming? As far as specifying anything with respect to the town's own approach to funding stormwater infrastructure. So we talked about stormwater management bylaws having to do with, you know, how a private property owner would manage stormwater within their property. But it's also a place where the town can establish this charge or the fund or the requirement to fund it. Whereas I don't think a budget, you know, you're just doing a 1-year authorization, so there's nothing to say it would be levied again next year, as far as the budget goes.
other than the debt?
Yeah, well, other than the need to do it.
Deputy Mayor,
Yeah, and, I don't believe your clarification is correct.
Excuse me, could you
So-
speak up?
Sorry.
You're having
My
It's like a
apologies.
private conversation over there.
Sorry, my apologies. That clarification that the infrastructure charge is per unit. I don't pay $600 per unit. Apart for my property, I have 2 units. I
Don't say it on camera.
Yeah, well, no, I'll say it because with that in mind, I'm sort of wondering the rationale for charging it per unit. It's supposed to be per PID because it's charged for each and every provincial assessment document I get. That's how that charge comes through.
So it's
why-
gonna be per unit when it's condominiumized, but it's not gonna be per unit when it's a rental.
When it's around.
That must be the distinction.
Yeah.
Because I know like the
It's-
Quinlan, they each get it.
Okay.
So that's gonna be.
But that's different.
858 units.
So that's one PID,
Yeah.
like that's one, you know, so that's the distinction, is it's not just one PID, but it's also not every dwelling unit. It's,
Yeah.
it's either a condominiumized dwelling unit or a vacant piece of land, or it's a larger collection of dwelling units on a single PID getting one charge.
Every tax assessment account.
Yes,
Yeah, that's, because I would have said, no, I'm not gonna vote for that.
Councilor Curley.
Well,
We've always described it as per unit in our budget, yeah, every year, yeah.
well, and I think functionally, I had understood that it was per dwelling unit, because I remember when the infrastructure charge first came in, that an owner of a property on Edgewater was very perplexed and complained about having two infrastructure charges because of the two units in the building on the property. I just remember that really well. That happened, and so I've always understood that it was for every
So
dwelling
I think
unit.
the key thing here and why it's important that we're using the same basis and not changing it for anyone watching, there's no change in how we're doing it. Is that however we've calculated the infrastructure charge, that amount is increasing by 202. That's the key message here. So I'm sorry, I didn't come prepared to actually explain the methodology for the infrastructure charge, because we've always been doing it.
Yeah.
But suffice to say, we've been doing it that way, but with a larger amount, and I can certainly ask Ashley to send everybody a very specific rundown of how we're charging it.
Just make a final point on this item is, this is a very impactful decision by council. So it is true, though, that there's a nuance about this particular charge that is different from the historical charge in the sense of this charge, this incremental $202.23. It's not just pouring into a wastewater reserve per se. It is backstopping a loan for at least $2 million to finance the project on Main Street. And once that loan is taken, there isn't going to be an opportunity to simply cancel this fee. The loan will have to be recovered through some mechanism. So it is a difference because we are not just committing the $175,000 that this fee is going to raise every year. We're really committing to $2 million in capital investment that needs to be financed over, 25 years. So I think that's important to understand. This isn't a $175,000 decision. This is a decision being taken on behalf of everybody in the town who's paying it to finance a $2 million waste stormwater upgrade on Main Street and other streets down the road. But in the absence of this financing, in the absence of this fund, that project could not go forward.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks for the clarification. I think, so one of the questions in my mind, and I think I've asked this in different declarations before, now that we've separated it that way, there will be questions for certain particular streets and particular locations. Maybe one of them whereby, well, I'm not getting any stormwater service right now. So and I remember we had citizens sort of coming and saying, we don't have stormwater infrastructure on our streets. Will this now become a case where, we are paying for this, then we have to accelerate those projects together? So I think of Pine Grove as an example.
Long Hill Road.
Yeah, Long Hill Road. So what happens for going forward in terms of those projects? Those questions will come.
Well, I mean, I guess if I can answer that, I think it's great that they will come. Obviously, there's a press release specific to stormwater charge in here. And one of the things it mentions is that this is the beginning of taking action to upgrade our community's infrastructure for stormwater management. So after last summer in particular, everybody's come in and said, we have all these challenges for stormwater management. We're not going to fix them all overnight. But the thing about this mechanism is that it is, as Councillor Feeny said, an ongoing funding mechanism. So we'll start in areas where there have been noted concerns and where there's an opportunity to address those. We'll do that and then we'll move on to the next. This is where the town's asset management program does help because we understand the age and condition of all of our infrastructure. We're able to try to align underground work with other necessary underground work. That's what's happening on Main Street. Councillor Feeney's point is we're doing a water wastewater line project. We happen to have a submerged water or a buried water course under the street, and there's a lot of work that's needed to upgrade the management of that water course. So that happens to be happening while the rest of the Main Street project is happening. But simultaneously in this year's budget, and again, this is noted in the press releases, We have stormwater improvement happening on Y Street, on Pine Grove, on Fairmont, on Coburg. And so, you know, we're working on those areas that are isolated that can be done on their own. We're working on those areas that are done as part of a larger project. And over the next 10, 20 years, we're gonna continue to work in areas throughout the community. So, you know, Councillor Feeney's point was a good one. We are tying up some of these funds as we do projects. And councils over the years are gonna have to manage when the next project, major project, smaller projects are able to move forward. But, you know, ultimately, we're gonna just do as many as we can do, as quickly as we can do them, and if residents feel that more should be done, you know, obviously, there may be a need to increase the charge in the future. But I think council has taken pains to set this at a level that does accommodate projected spending without, you know, absolutely burdening the individual property owner.
Deputy Mayor,
Well, do you think it would be?
it's the Deputy Mayor.
So, I wasn't here for the budget conversation, that's probably why I have so many questions. Do you think it would be important or necessary for us to create, similar to how we have that 10-year infrastructure, capital expenses plan, to have a plan that sort of shows residents, this is what the tentative, I guess, stormwater fixes that might happen on bus front, so that there isn't just a feeling, well, I have to be the squeaky wheel for my location to be looked at in priority. But at least there's a plan that council is following and people know mine is coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a lot of the role as management planning. Right now, if people are looking at this and they want to see in the specific budget document, page 129 and 130, 130, 131, does provide the list of past, current, and future year stormwater projects as we understand them. So you've got a pretty considerable amount of projects listed there, but that will continue to develop and be fleshed out more as we go. So the expectation is that by July, council will probably receive from the Asset Management Committee a draft stormwater management or a draft stormwater asset management plan is what I'm trying to say. And so that will be reflective of this budget, but it will also contextualize it in terms of what we know about our existing infrastructure gaps and risks and that type of thing. So ultimately, you know, it is council's budget that sets that 10-year projection. And then next year we'll update based on council's budget, hopefully continuing more robust plan. But yeah, that's so right now the people interested to know should look at the budget. And then hopefully within the next 2 months, we'll have an individual standalone document for each asset class of about 10 pages that just gives people a basic overview.
Councillor Carver.
We did talk about the importance of the public information, public awareness, because to help the community understand this change charge. And I think we can't stress that enough, how important that will be to, so it's not just look in this big, 100-page document of the budget document, you'll find your information. I think we really have to do a lot of outreach with information, infographics, and repeatedly.
So as far as that goes, obviously the first thing is we do have a press release on the budget. We also have a specific press release for the stormwater charge. Those will go out this week on the website, social media, and to the local media if they choose to pick them up. Beyond that, there is a special budget newsletter that goes out, so that will probably be going out next week, and that will also highlight this. Obviously, it's one of the main parts. We can also take the opportunity to call back to it in the regular newsletters for the next couple of months. So that's something we talked about doing. And then ultimately the stormwater management bylaw process coming to Policy and Strategy Committee next month. And from there forward to presumably a public information meeting and a public hearing in July will also bring focus to stormwater. So by the time people see this on their interim bill, if they haven't gotten the news, they'll have been at least a half dozen specific points of contact as we talked about before. And then I think, we'll need to continue that. And I imagine the election will help people to be aware of this. People will probably be talking about it.
So there's a motion on the floor.
There is indeed. Who said?
Seconded.
Gonna ask the clerk to repeat the motion, but I won't. Councillor Feeney made the motion, and who seconded? Councillor Wilson. Okay, you've heard the motion. The question's been addressed. All in favor? That first motion is carried. Councillor Carver, do you want to take the second motion?
Are we going around the table? Yes, I'll move that council approve the 2024-25 general capital budget with expenditures totaling $11,015,631, supported by a projected $3,518,926 in external funding.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now, seconds it. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? That motion's carried. Councillor Now, it's your turn.
I'll move that council approve the 2024-25 fire department operating budget with expenditures in the amount of $846,205 as presented, and fire tax rates set at 21.4 cents per hundred.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney? You've heard the motion?
I just have one point on the fire rate. So the $846,000 is also comprised of a generous donation from the Fire Society of $146,000, as well as our partners and friends who live in Oakland and Indian Point and Mayor's Cove and Cornwall. I mean, pardon me, and Clearland as well. So it's not just our 21.4 cents. It's the entire Mahone Bay and area and district who's funding the 846,000.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Anything else on the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. Deputy Mayor,
I'd like to move the council approve the 24-25 fire department capital budget with expenditures totaling $702,094.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson? Moved and seconded. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Councillor Wilson,
With council, I'm happy to move the council approve the 24-25 electrical utility operating budget with operating expenditures in an amount of $2,968,058.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor seconds. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? The motion is carried. Citizen Councillor Lawrence-Krause.
Thank you. I move that council approve the 2024-25 electric utility capital budget with expenditures totaling $147,000.
How much?
147,000.
1,000.
100,000?
147,000.
147.
147.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lawrence-Krause. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now seconds. On the motion? On the question? All in favor? The motion is carried. Councillor Feeney, we're back to you.
Mayor, keeping in mind our earlier discussion about water rates, we will approve, I move that we approve the 2024-2025 water utility operating budget with the operating expenditures in the amount of $888,797.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. Deputy Mayor has a question.
Friendly amendment,
Please.
and no water rate increase this year.
Based on, well, these are just expenditures. So is this revenue? This is.
No, they're just expenditures.
This is
So
just
when we talked about it
expenses.
earlier, we said the way you could say it was just do this full thing like up to the point where it says as presented. And then just say as amended to reflect no change in rates in 2024-25.
You know, fair enough, Deputy Mayor, as amended.
Okay. Councilor Carver, you're okay with that?
And clerk, could you put that?
Okay, could you repeat that motion, please, Madam Clerk?
Okay. The council approved the 2024-25 water utility operating budget with operating expenditures in the amount of $888,797 as amended to reflect no change in rates in 2024-25.
So there will be no change in water rates until as early as 26. Is that what we're
Just
saying?
all we're saying is
25,
that the
26.
budget was approved to show no increase in rates. So council will have an opportunity to consider a rate setting.
When
in
the rate
budget.
report is received. Okay,
Several life rafts there. Thank you very much.
anything else on the question? On the motion then, all in favor? Motion's carried, thank you.
So I move the council approve the 2024-25 water utility capital budget with expenditures totaling $4,610,241, supported by a projected $2,144,350 in external funding.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, on the question?
Second.
Oh, you're seconding, I'm sorry. Deputy Mayor seconds. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried.
I'll move that council approve the 2024-25 cemetery budgets in the amount of $46,150 for Park Cemetery and $22,100 for Bayview Cemetery as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney seconds. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried.
And Mayor, finally, I'd move that the council direct staff to issue a budget press release based on the 2024-2025 budget when it's completed. So I'm assuming there's gonna be some more edits before it's finally out the door.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Carver. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. CAO,
And then do we want to do a separate one to approve the press release on the stormwater charge?
Yes, I think that makes sense.
okay.
So move. That
Go ahead, Councillor Carver.
That council approved the 2024-25 budget press release regarding the stormwater
Sure, yeah.
charge. Will that work?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried.
And if there is any feedback on those that I haven't received yet, please do give it to me as soon as possible,
Yeah.
because they do need to go out by the end of the day tomorrow. I don't think there was necessarily, but to Councilor Cooney's point, I know I've discussed them with David and got his quotes and everything. So. Thanks.
Thank you to everyone around the council table. Budget time is always a very difficult, very time-consuming time. I think a lot of people who have never sat around the council table think it's an easy process. And then it happens that it's a cakewalk, but not the case. A lot of scrutiny, a lot of agonizing, a lot of agreeing and disagreeing. That gets us to the point that we've just witnessed where council has passed the budget. Okay, let's go to committee reports. 8.1, the council remuneration committee, the draft meeting minutes of April 12th. Is anyone here on that committee? I don't think they are.
No, I think it's all citizens.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. CAO, did you want to offer a comment or two on it? or-
Just that they're moving right ahead, and they met again today, and I think they've met 4 times now, so they're certainly moving along. I did ask Deputy CAO if he felt that they would complete their mandate in time at this rate, and he said he was confident that they would.
Okay.
So I think that's why they are meeting so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor Garber.
CAO referenced 3 or 4 meetings, but these are the first minutes we've received, I think.
Yeah, these should be the second minutes, I think, but there are 2 missing here. One was 2 weeks ago and the other one was just today. And the one from 2 weeks ago just wasn't, the minutes weren't
Okay.
ready when we put the package together.
Okay. I realize that we're still a long way from the declaration date for persons who may be deciding to put their name forward for the election. But is there any requirement for salary review the person not be a candidate or a potential candidate for council?
I don't think so, but the mandate of the committee is to be discharged before July, so there wouldn't be any overlap between still serving on that committee and the nomination period.
Okay. Let's go to 8.2, the Policy and Strategy Committee meeting of April the 8th. We don't have to speak to the CAO.
Sure, yeah, it's a little extra tricky here with the regrets and the, who would actually be chairing the meeting, but the policy and strategy meetings, three meetings in a row here, only considered the same set of human resources policies. So there are no motions to council on the 8th or 22nd. The minutes of the meeting on the 6th are the significant ones in that they recommend council adopt the human resource policy manual, which is attached as a separate piece. So if council just wants to accept the reports of the 8th and 22nd, we could do that, or just jump right into the recommendation on the 6th.
Okay, what is your wish, council?
I would like to move that council accept the minutes of the various reports from the Policy and Strategy Committee as presented, and that we adopt the Town of Mahone Bay Human Resources Policy Manual.
Seconded by Councillor Carver.
Can I just ask that you separate the 2 things, just so that we have a clean motion on the policy manual?
Okay.
Okay, so this motion will be to accept the staff reports.
Yeah, can be.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
Councillor Carver, you okay with that? All right. So the motion before you, council, is to accept the reports, the draft minutes of the 3 meetings of the Policy and Strategy Committee where the Human Resources Policy was discussed. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. So we now go to the Human Resources Management Policy itself. That was presented and discussed and adjusted and reviewed. So do we have a motion to accept that, or will we go with the same one? Councilor Owens-Crowe?
I move that we accept the draft human resources policy as presented to the Policy and Strategy Committee.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councilor Carver? You've heard the motion?
And just if you're both okay with the policy, it should be adopt, if that's.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, adopt the
Semantics.
policy. All right. You've heard the motion? On the question? Drum roll, all in favor? Motion is carried. The Police Advisory Board. Deputy Mayor?
So there's a couple of motions, I believe. The first one is like to the council direct staff to move the 50-kilometer speed limit sign posted at the Musselmarsh River Bridge at an appropriate distance further up the hill to address noted safety concerns.
Okay. Do we have a seconder?
Recognizing that this is probably illegal, I second.
Yeah, and the question, basically, this came up because we continuously talked about how fast vehicles are coming down the bridge, and we, over the course of time, we looked at the speeds, and people are not slowing down. And the Department of Transportation is not willing to to help us out by moving it, and so we were like, well, let's trigger action in some way, shape or form. And this action will help hopefully create an opportunity for them to tell us we're doing something illegal and perhaps address things in a legal way in a manner that is not so.
And the road down the hill is freshly paved, so.
They were slowed down today.
Yeah, that was a little.
Councilor Carver, do you have a question?
I thought there was a way of posting a sign that would say 50 mile zone ahead.
It is.
That's
the
It is.
Yeah.
There is that now, yeah, yeah.
But they still don't slow down.
But is it that sign that needs to be moved?
Well, both. You have
Oh.
to move the 50 to where the 50 ahead is and the 50 ahead to be
Oh, okay,
further up.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just wanted to note as well that this came up with PAB in part as well because of the upgrading project that is currently going on. So jokingly, it's causing some delays, but when it's all said and done, the road is gonna be wider and there's an encouragement for cyclists to use it. And the province is not upgrading the bridge. So there's gonna be a moment where widened shoulders and 3 different streets intersecting suddenly coalesce into a barely 2-lane wide bridge with no support for pedestrians or cyclists. So, you know, by making this move, we're reflecting concerns that are not in town, surely that's true, but should be concerns to the province. So as the deputy mayor says, hopefully, if they were to take interest all of a sudden, they would share the concerns that we're raising in the moment.
So basically, we're pushing for to do an illegal move.
Yeah, we don't have jurisdiction
We
to
don't
put
have
a sign
jurisdiction.
outside of the town. We would inform the provincial Department of Highways that it's our intention to do this. And hopefully they'll come in and say, well, we're happy to do it. But this is the step we have not yet taken because we've stopped at saying, could you please do it, and not getting any answer. Or getting a no answer direct to the minister.
So could the motion be that we're gonna move the sign to see what they say?
Well, the motion is just to move the sign, but we'll start by notifying them of our intention to move the sign and we'll see where that gets us.
Okay,
So they'll be notified before the sign gets.
Yeah,
moved.
yeah, that would be our intention.
It's better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission.
that's right. Okay, you heard the motion on the question. And we're gonna use your card to do it, so. All in favor? Motion's carried. Good stuff. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, the second motion is that I'd like to move that the town of Mahone Bay Police Advisory Board remain an independent entity. That was the recommendation of DAB. And once it's seconded, I can sort of give a rationale as to.
I'll second.
Okay,
What was the extra bit that was added on?
he's gonna tell us why that motion's there.
So the motion that the town of Mahone Bay Police Advisory Board remain an independent entity came about because we referred the question of whether we want a regional PAB to our PAB to discuss, and basically in the conversation, folks felt that they would want their own autonomy, some opportunity to have, I guess, the regular conversations they've been having with members of the police force. Taking that away might not necessarily serve the town well, and so I believe it was unanimous that we stay as we are.
Just have one question. If there is a regional PAB that is comprised of the other municipalities within the South Shore, will we still have an opportunity to have a representative at that table? And I'm assuming we would still be able to send a representative quarterly if they're meeting.
You want to comment on?
Yeah, I guess.
Two for the price of one. as
Not,
well?
not specified, I guess I don't think we'd have status at that board, so if somebody went, it would just be as an observer. Ultimately, I think there's still some question as to whether any of the other units will decide to move forward. So we could always take, if they do, we could always take an action of writing to them in that regard, but I think Chester has now confirmed that they're not in. And the question is amongst the other three, because
well,
obviously Bridgewater has their
Let it
own.
play out, yeah.
And in that particular move, I think was part of what informed the conversation.
So it's just maintaining the status quo.
Yes.
Yeah, and the real question will be, would MODL and the town of Lunenburg proceed And if they were to proceed, then would we have any change of heart as a result? But we can let them proceed at a pace and see what happens.
But they would only be proceeding with modal.
Yeah, it would just be more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Bridgewater
Bridgewater
has
has
a
their own
totally
police,
separate.
And
police.
Chester's already said that.
So it'll unfold. Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Let's go to another.
Just that
We'll have to vote
one, we
the
just didn't
motion.
call to, we didn't call it quits.
Well, so just procedurally, do we need, so we have a PAB.
Yeah, you're
It's,
right.
it's established, it's.
It actually, their recommendation shouldn't have been highlighted because it's not really a motion for here.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable with withdrawing it? I think the important thing was that we report to council
Yeah.
that this is the committee's
Yeah.
recommendation.
Okay.
But since the recommendation was not to do something, council actually have to make a motion.
Okay.
Council would have had to if we'd gone the other
Oh,
way,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's highlighted, it's good we remember to talk about it, but we don't actually need it, so we
Fair
can
enough, I
withdraw,
would-
yeah, so I should have
yeah.
said that, that's,
We need
Good
a
point,
motion
Councilor
to not do something.
yeah, we don't need a motion to not do something.
Okay, so that issue is finished, Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. Then let's go to the nominations committee. Group was considering the volunteer of the year. The representative volunteer committee. We have two members of the committee,
I have been nominated to speak on our behalf.
so you're the nominated speaker of the
I am,
year,
in fact.
okay?
And I must say that this year of all years was complicated because we had 4 worthy applicants, or nominees, I guess you could say, because they were nominated by others. It was a tricky dance to come to a conclusion, but I think we came to the right conclusion in recommending to council that we nominate Tim Larry.
Okay. Tim Mary, no stranger to this table.
Second that motion, Mayor.
Thank you. Moved and seconded that Mr. Mary, Tim Mary from the Mahone Bay United Soccer Group in particular, has been nominated as our representative volunteer of the year and well deserved at that.
And I just wanted to mention that Mr. Murray will be here on the 11th to present about the Mumbai United's annual activities. That was postponed for March.
Good. Okay. On the question. All in favor? Let the record show that the motion was unanimous. That Mr. Mary be our volunteer representative of the year. Okay. Let's go to Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program monthly report. You have the report, Councillor Carver, or do you want to raise any, or?
I do want to bring up in this report that there was an increase in the number of outreaches to the Senior Safety Committee, and I'm trying to bring up the April report. And I did inquire as to why the numbers had jumped. If you remember, March, they had dropped a little bit, and then they've gone up. So one client was working through a serious scam, having lost a significant amount of money. Support for further prevention and reporting process, you know, is going on with preventing further loss so that they don't become unhoused. So this person lost a very significant amount of money. The others are individuals without little local circles, so they don't have family nearby or close friends that then can help them out. This is varied from informing resources and making referrals to other organizations. So, you know, instead of going to a family or friend, they're using the support from the services offered. They really feel that some of this is due to the increased awareness with some of the local programming they've been offering within the county and information that they've been putting out on social media. And you know, people just talking about it more. I know I brought some things forward with, you know, when put pamphlets in the entryway, and she's going to refresh some of the pamphlets as well here at Town Hall. So keeping it on the radar.
Our percentage of seniors population is probably a bit higher than our percentage of the general population, but 18% still seems like a substantial amount.
Yeah, that's one person.
So what does the 18% represent? Is it 18% increase over the previous?
Of the
months?
calls that came in.
Of all the
18%,
calls,
yeah.
18% of all the calls.
Good.
So I move that we accept this report if there.
Information, thank you.
Information.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver seconds. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. And back to the deputy mayor, I think, for the planning advisory committee.
Yeah, the two motions in this minute. So the first one, the committee recommended to council that the facilitated joint session of the planning advisory committee, the asset management committee, and the climate and environment committee proposed by the asset management committee take place early 2025.
We have a seconder?
I'll second it. May I speak to it?
On the question, sure.
Thank you. I think it's an excellent idea to do this. I'm a little bit concerned that in early 2025, the new council and the committee members are all going to be very new on the asset management, the planning advisory committee, and the climate and environment committee. So it's better to have that kind of meeting 1 year or 2 years down the road, but it's still a good idea, I think, to do it, but it'll just be a different discussion.
And the councillors here, you could always just change it to say take place in 2025 or take place in the first quarter. That's at your prerogative.
That first session could be about the importance of having those joint
Mhm,
meetings as opposed to particular content.
I'd be comfortable with removing the word early if that was. It wasn't the recommendation of the committee, though.
Yeah. So taking
Please
the
recommend.
spirit of the folks who are in the room who are making the recommendation, I'll just leave it and have the new council determine
Take them, yeah.
what early means, because I think the committee members really wanted the meeting to happen even before then, so that felt like compromise.
Yeah, and I totally support the idea.
Yes.
Okay,
It's on the floor already.
Yes.
that's right. Okay. All in favor? Motion's carried.
Okay.
Your second one.
Second motion is that council. The committee recommended to council that the design of the Edgewater Street project be shared with the planning advisory committee at an appropriate stage to receive feedback.
Okay, so moved. Did you move?
Yeah, I moved it, seconded it, just
And
like
you
to provide some
seconded?
context.
Okay, is there any committee that would not benefit from a briefing on the Edgewater Street project, I wonder?
I think many would benefit, but this one was particularly interested in that report because it felt that it cuts across planning issues, so they wanted to see how that, I guess, how that plan looks like and be able to provide some feedback, not necessarily changes, but just be able to see what it is before the actual work happened, and I think there was some back and forth in the city on that.
And I should just clarify that, we have tried to get this committee to appreciate that if they wanted to talk about something, even if staff could bring it now, that they should refer it up to council so that it would be okayed by council as a use of staff and committee time. So my suggestion would be the appropriate time to receive feedback is on the design brief that's currently available. And then we would put that on the next or following agenda, because there won't be any more detailed information until October. And at that point, we're to the election period. It's hard to know what kind of feedback could be provided. wouldn't require some sort of substantial change. So if we wanted to capture any feedback that's meaningful now, I'd say the time to get it is now, before we spend a lot of effort on engineers and then have a new council that aren't familiar with the background to the project. So if everyone would agree, I think as, you know, just at an appropriate stage, that an appropriate stage would be at either the June or July meeting, and the determination for me would mostly be on, do we have an incredibly full agenda in June, which we may at this point. But I think it was more about getting council's permission to engage in that review of the design brief with staff and to provide feedback.
So the design review. Like, why would we use the PAC for that?
I'm not advocating that part, but maybe you could try to explain why they thought so.
Like, I understand.
I agree that every committee would reasonably have some interest, and
Personal
ultimately it's council to
Somebody who lives in town might be curious about, you know, what's happening there, but. Like, there will be an opportunity for a large public engagement, so I'm assuming we're gonna have some diagrams and some, that we already have a lot now, but I'm
There'll
sure.
be signage going up on the waterfront to help people to see the full project and what to anticipate, and there'll be information in the newsletter, the budget newsletter. We're not planning to have an open house on that project, given the nature of it. It's an outdoor, infrastructure project. We don't usually have an open house, but there would be regular, information over the next number of months. I think the difference is that a committee is, has the status to provide feedback, but, ultimately, I think it's a reasonable question whether there's any reason to believe that there would be feedback in line with the mandate of this particular committee. But that's a quick council to discuss tonight, I think.
I think very valid question. It is the wish of the committee
No, fair enough.
to a certain extent. What you just said really resonates with me in the sense that we can share what we have now for them to provide some feedback that might inform when you reach out to start doing the design process. I think that would be the way to go, rather than get whatever's been developed by the engineers and then bring it in for feedback, and then it won't have any impact or effect in the entire project. Now that's prerogative of council, whether we want the PAC to have that ability to do that. It might be a good thing just for committee members to feel that they can shape and influence what council thinks.
I think it did follow on, and again, it's, discretionary how you feel about this, but it followed on a discussion about the expansion of municipal services to support development. So where the committee had just, through the Plan Mahone Bay process, established zoning in that area, I think there was a question, kind of like knowing your sewer water extension, would the zoning in that area be appropriate? Is there any concern around, what are we gonna be getting rezoning requests, that type of thing? So there is a little interaction, but I mean, you'd have that level of interaction with any project that would expand or upgrade municipal infrastructure. So it's not like we go around spot rezoning after every municipal infrastructure upgrade. I mean, these things are organic, right? Which we had a great discussion about how these relationships are organic.
I wouldn't mind having a little more soak time on this issue, not specifically on this request, but there are similar requests coming from other committees. For example, in HAC, where there's a community, there's interest in certain topics that may not necessarily align specifically with the mandate of the committee. And it's terrific when that happens, when you have really engaged citizens and members that want to talk about things and are personally interested in things. But I just think we should have a conversation about what happens when that personal interest ends up driving immense amount of effort into the staff's day to day. So I think it's more of a global topic around all of our committees and how they actually function between staff and council. And if you wouldn't mind, Deputy Mayor, maybe we could carve out some time in one of the next two strategy meetings to talk about really and kind of use this as an impetus to talk about it. I'm not saying we defer it. Inevitably, we have to get back to the committee And there's a recommendation for the committee. I'm not saying it should be, if a decision needs to be made on this recommendation. I think a little more soak time probably would do us some good.
Just in terms of
Procedure,
procedurally, so
yeah.
procedurally, I think, you would make a motion now to refer this motion to the policy and strategy, or the, yeah.
Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, I'd be prepared to make that motion, Mayor, to
Mhm.
refer this motion to the meeting in late May, and hopefully we can carve out sometime. I think that is a busy agenda that evening, I recall.
I
So
mean, they're
it'll
big
be-
items, but I do
Okay.
think there should be time on the agenda, with only
Okay.
2 items, there should be time.
Yes,
Oh.
fair enough.
I'm mixed on it, but I'll accept it.
Do you need a seconder for that?
Please,
I'll
Um,
second.
I can't second it because it's on my motion.
okay.
Okay,
All right.
so is that just an amendment to your motion, or is it
That we have
a
to
separate
vote on
motion?
this motion.
It's a deferring motion, so we'll have to vote on this
Okay,
motion, so we need a seconder for this motion.
Suzanne.
Suzanne, second,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, so now we're in discussion on Joe's motion, which if it passes, stops the discussion on the original motion.
Okay. On the question for Councillor Feeney's motion? All in favor? Motion is carried, the discussion stops for now. Okay. All right. Let's go to new business,
Yes.
6.1.
Thank you. During the past week or so, there's been a lot of discussion amongst ourselves and in the community about the film production and the complications. And first of all, the excitement about having the film production here, and then the frustration that people, business owners, citizens, visitors to the town experience during the traffic barriers, barricades, and the loss of business, and just the general frustration in the community. And we had a good discussion with the Chamber of Commerce last week, and that was excellent. And we know that the Chamber of Commerce has been following up diligently and keeping council informed about their communications impressively with their communications with us. And I think that it would be good for our town if we had a film policy, a policy that guided how film productions would be carried out in the town, and that it would include reference to who communicates with whom about what, and in very detailed format, because we have learned that I think in this process that assumptions may have been made, and we certainly know that at least one person at one point said, oops, I forgot to tell people what was going to happen. So I would give notice of
There's
motion. I can't make a motion, can I? So
No,
it's just notice
just
of motion.
notice of motion.
So I'm giving a notice of motion to the effect that council direct staff to draft a film policy for council's consideration. At the
Okay,
next meeting, I'll do that.
thank you.
I've given you my preamble now.
All right. That is the end of our open agenda. We do have one closed session agenda under MGA 22(2)E, contract negotiations. Is there any comment from any of the people at home?
There's one question. I would like clarification on the infrastructure charge per unit. Does that 500 plus infrastructure charge apply to all households?
So this was where I was saying it is the same basis as the existing infrastructure charge. So the simplest thing is if you are a resident and you did receive an infrastructure charge, then this would be an increased charge would apply to the same people who received the previous charge. I did get some clarification as to where to point people if they're looking for the basis of the charge on our website, you can look up bylaws, and there is a bylaw called the Capital Infrastructure Bylaw. That does actually establish the specifics of who is levied that charge. But the easiest thing is if you were charged infrastructure charge last year, you would be charged this year for the increased amount. Hopefully that helps.
So the new infrastructure charge is
Which be
500 approximately,
$502.23,
and last year it was,
300.
okay. And the difference is that associated with the stormwater bylaw implementation,
Yes.
okay. All right. All right, is that it? No other questions? All right.
14.
Still 14. A nice warm summer night. Okay, okay, that's great.
They're sitting out on the deck watching.
Oh, yeah, this is good. Hearing that, would entertain a motion to go in camera. So moved, do we have a seconder?
Oh.
Councilor Carver, all in favor, motion's carried. Say goodnight to the people at home, thank you for joining us. Any questions pop up for you in the next couple of days, call town hall, call one of the councilors or call the mayor.